Welcome to R&R Living Life. In this episode, Rick and I continue on from Wantabadgery through Ningus via Aura Road before stopping in Gundagai. From Gundagai, we follow the Hume Highway, making a visit to Gunning along the way, before continuing on to Goulburn, where we camp for a couple of days. From Goulburn, we continue along the Hume Highway to join with the Illawarra Highway to Mossvale. And then from Mossvale we continue on through Robinson and out onto the Princess Highway through Kiama and then to Berry, where we base ourselves for a couple of days. What a day that was, travelling on the highway and over high wind areas. Thankfully Gidget travelled like an angel, and the boat had no worries. Some of the country was very dry, with cattle in very poor condition, and in some places livestock were being fed. We had been dodging showers for most of the morning. It is always interesting seeing the contrast between ploughed paddocks and open country, or paddocks that have crops. I was surprised by the vineyards at the Junee Gundagai turn-off. About 24 kilometres west of Gundagai was Nangus, a small country village on the north side of the Murrumbidgee River. The historic Nangus Post Office opened in July 1897 and is still open today. We found the Golden Fleece Service Centre an interesting piece of history from our younger years. Golden Fleece was an Australian brand of petroleum products and service stations operated by Harold Slee and Company, a business founded in Melbourne in 1893. We were now entering the Cootamundra Gundagai Regional Council Shire, the gateway to the Riverina, covering an area of 3,981 square kilometres and occupying the slopes of the western side of the Great Dividing Range between Yass and Tumut, and to the north the beginning of the northern part of the Riverina Plains. The region is primarily farming communities producing wheat, canola, cereal crops, sheep, wool, fat lambs and cattle. Outside of agriculture, a meat processing plant and engineering firms are major industries of the area, as well as retail trade, food and accommodation, manufacturing, health and social care. In addition, honey production and viticulture are developing industries. Such a very diverse shire. We had travelled to Gundagai with the aim of visiting the iconic dog on the Tuckerbox monument, which commemorates early Australian pioneers, but both Rick and I were very disappointed in it. We found the historic buildings in town more interesting. Not only is the town famous for its rich history, but also the catastrophic 1852 flood that devastated the area. Gundagai's location on the Murrumbidgee River, its connection to bushranging law, and its role in songs and stories about the Australian outback have also contributed to its fame. On leaving Gundagai, we continued along the Hume Highway, known for its history as one of the oldest and most travelled roads in Australia, with a connection to early explorations between the Melbourne and Sydney area. We travelled over Conroy's Gap at 650 metres, and after climbing Mount Kosciuszko seemed more like a small hill. Later that day we arrived in Goulburn. We had been dodging showers for most of the day, but as we entered Yass Valley the rain got heavier before clearing as we reached Gunning, with its claim to fame as being part of the richest wool growing area in the world. In 1824, one of Australia's most significant colonial explorations began in Gunning, when Hume and Hovell led a groundbreaking expedition from Gunning to Port Phillip Bay in search of new grazing land. Gunning was established in 1838. We took time to look at Pye Cottage Museum, originally built in Dalton in 1860 as a settler's cottage, one of the last of its kind in the area, furnished with household items, intriguing photographs and agricultural tools and artefacts from the area's rich wool heritage. Thankfully, the Hume Highway now bypasses the town, which means that the historic buildings in the main street are no longer affected by the roar and rumble of trucks and every other vehicle travelling between Sydney and Melbourne. We arrived in Goulburn dodging rain again. Goulburn, situated in the southern tablelands of New South Wales, was officially established as a township in 1834, named after Henry Goulburn, a British politician who was instrumental in the early development of New South Wales. In March 1863, 45 years later, Goulburn was declared Australia's first inland city by royal letters issued by Queen Victoria. Goulburn flourished on the grounds of a prosperous wool industry, laying the foundation for robust agricultural roots. The city's ascent continued with the cathedrals, a fleeting yet impactful gold rush, and the evolution of a rail system, all contributing to Goulburn's remarkable growth. This historic town is celebrated for its architectural heritage that boasts grand Victorian buildings like the iconic Goulburn Post Office and St Xavier's Cathedral, reflecting its rich colonial history. European exploration of the region began in 1818 when explorers Hume and Meehan passed through the area. The town is also home to the Big Merino, a towering sheep-shaped structure that pays homage to its agricultural roots. Surrounded by fertile farmland and rolling hills, Goulburn offers scenic drives through picturesque countryside. Overnight there was constant drizzle, but thankfully the clouds cleared and we were in for a nice day. We spent time checking out the historic buildings around the city centre. It always amazes me just how majestic some of them are, and to think that some were built before the 1900s, well before modern technology. They have so much character, built to be robust and sturdy. On leaving Goulburn, there was a very interesting turn that gave way to the highway, not to the drivers on the right. We followed the Remembrance Way, a living memorial that runs along the Hume and Federal highways between Sydney and Canberra, commemorating Australia's Defence Force members, including various sites like the plantation in Yarra located at the junction of the highways. It was an interesting trip today, leaving Goulburn and heading towards Moss Vale, being only 128 kilometres southwest of Sydney, with the increase in traffic and the number of lanes. We crossed over the Nepean River with its headwaters that rise near Robinson and flows north in an unpopulated water catchment area into the Nepean Reservoir that supplies potable water to Sydney, as well as supplying agricultural production. There are 11 weirs located on the Nepean River that significantly regulate its natural flow. The river has been segmented into a series of weir lakes rather than a freely flowing river, and is also impacted by dams in the upper Nepean catchment. Moss Vale is surrounded by rolling farmlands, vineyards and beautiful gardens. It is one of New South Wales' most charming country towns we had driven through, but we found finding a place to park with Gidget difficult, eventually finding a spot behind the information centre. Moss Vale is rich with colonial heritage and architecture, with many old historic buildings, as well as the Leeton Gardens in the centre of town, located in Argyle Street, which is the main street, and the railway overbridge. From Moss Vale we made our way towards Robinson along the Illawarra Highway. Robinson is perched on the Illawarra Escarpment in the heart of the Southern Highlands, with a picturesque village surrounded by lush rainforest, with its green hues through the hills and dales, as well as undulating farmland with its rich red fertile soil, providing an abundance of rural farmland. Known also for the Big Potato, a quirky local landmark built in 1979 to promote the town's abundance of red soil potatoes, or known locally as Robbo Spuds. The town is also famous as the town where the 1995 film Babe was made. We were travelling into a strong headwind that became quite blustery in places as we neared Bowral. The town once served as a rural summer retreat for the gentry of Sydney, resulting in the establishment of a number of estates and manor houses in the district. Bowral is often associated with the cricketer Sir Donald Bradman. The first European to arrive in the area was ex-convict John Wilson, who was commissioned by Governor Hunter to explore south of the new colony of Sydney. The town grew rapidly, between the 1860s and the 1890s, mainly due to the building of the railway line from Sydney to Melbourne. After leaving Bowral, we continued along Kangaloon Road to Tourist Road that turned into the Illawarra Highway before making our way through the Macquarie Pass and into Shell Harbour. From there we continued along the Princess Highway, making a stop at Nengari Rest Stop for a break, and then it was back onto the highway past Kiama Downs and Kiama. My first glimpse of the Pacific Ocean looked very rough, but with the wind that we were experiencing, it couldn't have been anything but rough. For most of the morning, as we made our way along the highway, we had been watching the clouds, as on occasions they topped the ranges and then were blown further along, leaving low fog in the valleys. In the fog area we were treated to a spectacular rainbow. I had been fascinated by the clouds as they topped the ranges, but to see a rainbow was something special and took my mind off all the traffic. This was the first time we had been travelling along the Princess Highway. The highway extends from Sydney via Melbourne and then on to Adelaide, so we would be travelling it in a number of cases over the course of this trip. The highway follows the coastline for most of its length and thus takes quite an indirect and lengthy route. Because of the rural nature and lower traffic volumes over much of its length, the Princess Highway is a more scenic and leisurely route than the main highways between these major cities, but the condition of the road left a lot to be desired in places. We continued on from Kiama, historically a farming and agricultural centre, now a tourist destination, and past Gerringong, on a headland webbed with the inland waterways of Weary Gully, with its rolling farmland and rugged escarpments, to arrive later that day at Berry Showgrounds, where we made camp for a couple of days. Berry is a small town in the Shoalhaven region of the New South Wales south coast and has a rich historic heritage, with a large number of impressive 19th century buildings, both in the main street and around the town. The first European to visit the area was the explorer George William Evans, who crossed the Shoalhaven River in a bark canoe, climbed Camberwera Mountain and descended to Broughton Creek on a trek from Jervis Bay to Appin in 1812. By 1822, Alexander Berry and Edward Wollstonecraft had established Coolangatta, and the town of Berry, known as Broughton Creek, was developing as a settlement for timber workers. The name of Berry was formally changed by an Act of Parliament in 1890 to honour Alexander Berry, who had established the nearby Coolangatta estate in the 1820s. To gain access from the ocean to the Shoalhaven River, Berry employed Hamilton Hume and a party of convict labourers to cut a 209-yard canal between the Shoalhaven and the Crockhaven rivers. It was completed in 12 days and was the first canal constructed in Australia. The local Chamber of Commerce named it the Town of Trees in 1975 because towards the end of the last century the local settlers planted extensive stands of English oaks, elms and beech trees. That afternoon, Rick and I went uptown and walked up and down the main street, checking out all the businesses and historic buildings. After our walk, we thought we deserved a treat, especially after having navigated the Princess Highway that morning, so drove out to the treat factory in the old Creamery Lane and enjoyed a milkshake and some chocolates. What a day we had had! Being a dairy farmer's daughter, I was impressed with the treat factory as it was in the old Berry butter factory, such a great use of the buildings. On our way back to the showgrounds we crossed the railway line. Even though the railway line ran close to the showgrounds, we were not disturbed by the trains that ran past during the night. From its humble beginnings, the town has grown to where the local economy is driven by gift and craft shops, coffee lounges and antique shops, and amusingly a famous donut shop and a Cliche sourdough bakery. The following day we went exploring around Berry before making our way down the Princess Highway to Wantabadgery, then over Shoalhaven River. What a river, and what a bridge, and on to Nowra on the banks of the Shoalhaven River. Historically, the area around Bomaderry, Nowra, has relied on timber, wheat, wool and produce industries, and today supports tourism, local government, naval bases, manufacturing, dairying, paper and starch mills. On our way out to Jervis Bay, we passed the Navy's Fleet Air Arm Museum, the largest aviation museum in Australia, located adjacent to HMAS Albatross, Australia's home of naval aviation. We drove into the town of Jervis Bay Village, part of the Jervis Bay Territory, and were surprised by the number of kangaroos lounging on residents' front lawns. From the village we made our way out to Jervis Bay, a 102 square kilometre oceanic bay. Though the day was overcast, the bay, with its vivid aquamarine waters, was stunning. Jervis Bay is a drowned river valley and formed 15,000 years ago at the end of the last ice age. The bay took on its present appearance around 4000 BC, after the sea levels had risen 120 metres, and as sand dune barriers created the southern peninsula. The native forest along the shoreline was stunning. The height of some of the trees took me by surprise, and I tried to get a photograph of how tall they were, but I do not think I did them justice. The Booderee National Park covers around 3/4 of the area, with a variety of ecosystems including forests, woodlands and wetlands, and is a haven for diverse wildlife including rare and endangered species, and where the crystal clear waters meet beautiful white sandy beaches. After spending time at Jervis Bay, we made our way to Bristol Point Campground, surrounded by mature bushland, where we walked out onto the beach and enjoyed the stunning water views, before making our way to Murray's Beach boat ramp. I enjoyed the huge number of frogs croaking in the wetlands. We had spent the morning enjoying the stunning coastline before moving on to enjoy some of the maritime history of the area, but that is for next episode. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Join us next time as we continue on around the Jervis Bay area, enjoying Cape St George Lighthouse, Fitzroy Falls, where I see my first lyrebird, and Kangaroo Valley. Give us a thumbs up if you have enjoyed this episode, and leave a comment if you like. Stay safe and enjoy life. Cheers for now. Rick and Rosemary. R&R, living life.